And we're live. Good morning. And we were just talking about doing our vocal warm-up. So if you notice some of us making strange facial gestures, that's, we're just getting warmed up. Welcome to 1 Million Cups-Bentonville. If you have not joined us before, this is a product of the Kauffman Foundation, birthed from the concept that most of the community's problems can be solved over a million cups of coffee. I'm working on number 2 today, so if you haven't got your coffee, get some. Thank you. Great job, Jeff. Jeff, very good. So when communities share coffee, and for us at Startup Junkie, also beer is important. Conversation produces ideas and solves problems. So my name is Morgan Schultz, and I am with Startup Junkie Foundation. If you're not familiar with Startup Junkie or Conductor, we are a mission-driven organization that exists to improve lives through entrepreneurship and innovation. We do that through no-cost consulting for startups and entrepreneurs at all stages, from ideation to expansion, and also through events like these, where we showcase, celebrate, and support the entrepreneurial community in Arkansas. Before COVID, or BC, as I like to say, we would have had these in person and have actual coffee provided. But now we've adapted and we're on the virtual platform. So I want to give a big shout out to Brian Fitton with Go Rogue X, who is making all of this seamless virtual this virtual 1 million cups possible. So he's the one behind the scenes, making this look nice and actually function smoothly. So thank you, Brian and the team at Go Rogue X. With no further ado, I would like to introduce you to our guests today. We have with us Jeff and Jeff. Dr. Jeff Standridge is the managing director of the Conductor in Central Arkansas, and Jeff Amerine is the founder and managing director of Startup Junkie. They are here with us today to announce the launch of their new book, Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places. Take it away, Jeff.
Hey, thanks, Morgan. Appreciate it very much. Jeff Standridge, you want to put the slides up? Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and kick it off. It's always exciting to be back with 1 Million Cups. I remember when the Bentonville chapter, Northwest Arkansas chapter started some years back in the exchange, and we look forward to getting back to those days, so to speak, but we're glad to be with everybody this morning. And so we're going to talk about this journey that Jeff Standridge and I, and then really the whole team have been on this idea of creating Startup Junkies. And we're going to hopefully give some inspiration and some thoughts around the fact that building something sustainable in terms of an entrepreneurial ecosystem in an unexpected place, i.e. not Silicon Valley or New York, is possible, because over the course of the last 13 years, we've done it. So, Jeff, and the good news is, and this would never have happened, quite candidly, without the motivation and really the drive that Jeff Standridge brought to it, because he's written several books before. But we're releasing this book that we created together with several members of the Startup Junkie and Conductor team, called Creating Startup Junkies. This is what it'll look like, and it's coming out on the 28th, and you can find out a lot more about it at creatingstartupjunkies.com. So check that out. It's imminent release coming here.
We'll come back to the creatingstartupjunkies.com, but make sure, if you do nothing else, note that URL and go visit that, download a free sample, sign up for the virtual book signing. Again, we'll come back to that in a couple of moments.
So to give some context of what this journey has been like, that's captured in the book, and that, that we think is important in talking about how to build up, we'll talk a little bit about what we do. The main purpose, our why statement, if you will, is that everything we do is to inspire and empower entrepreneurs, innovators, and makers. So those disruptors and those agents of creative change, our whole objective and our prime directive is to make sure that we're doing things to make their dreams possible.
We that's our why statement. But if we dig one more layer below that, we can basically summarize it by saying it's because it's important. Entrepreneurship and innovation is in fact important. Many of you know that the Kauffman Foundation estimates that 85% virtually all of the net new job creation comes from startup companies. The fact of the matter is, large established companies and large publicly traded companies certainly are generally shrinking in size due to automation, due to technology, due to analytics and the things that they can do to manage their expenses better and their labor force better. Large companies are shrinking. So the ones that are adding jobs are those startups and small businesses. In fact, even today, they account for almost 99% of all employers and 50% of all employees in the U.S. But it's not just numbers in terms of the number of employers and number of employees. They're also more productive in producing intellectual property, and they account for a very large portion of all the high-tech job creation that gets created in the country. You know, we've been studying entrepreneurs and what entrepreneurs need for some time, and it really revolves around these three things: access to expertise in the form of mentoring, coaching, consulting, etc. An ecosystem where they can come together, get to know each other, share ideas, share resources, be trained, engage in workshops, networking, and then also access to capital. And so we'll talk more about how we describe these things in the four pillars that are described in the book in a few moments.
Well, next we'll talk a little bit about how we do it, sort of the mechanics of how we get through it. And in our model, as we said, you know, you've kind of seen that so much of the new job creation comes from startups and small business, but the failure rates are high. It's a high risk proposition. And so if we can remove some of those friction points, then that's kind of key to their ongoing success. Things like securing third-party funding sources for what we do so that the services that we offer can be completely free. You know, I often describe it as an unsustainable business model we've sustained for 13 years. And the only way that that works is by virtue of the fact that we have measurable outputs and outcomes that show the real economic impact and the successes that our clients have.
And we have to be close to and understand the potential funding organizations who have a vested interest in growing the economy and growing entrepreneurs, and looking for ways to add value to those organizations because they represent those third-party funding contracts that we've spoken about that enable us to provide the services for free to entrepreneurs below a certain threshold.
And one more point about that before we go on to the pillars, it's just an important point. If you think about traditional economic development, which was based on the idea of, very important, of retaining existing businesses, but bringing in large plants and whatnot, that's a very important activity. But in many ways, it's like trying to buy a winning lottery ticket. There's lots of competition. The odds sometimes are low for attracting. And it's kind of a win-lose model in that if you win in a locality by attracting a new business in, chances are they've left somewhere else if they're a large player. Whereas the Moneyball play, for those of you that remember that movie where you get the increased on-base percentage and the economic development that sticks, is focusing on making sure that your small businesses and your startups are vibrant and they have a good chance to succeed. That is kind of the whole crux of the matter. And candidly, that's why the federal government, the state governments, municipalities, and the foundations have found that the approach that we take and others who are entrepreneurial support organizations makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I have the opportunity to have a foot in both camps. So I'm on the board of directors of our economic development entity here in Faulkner County called the Conway Development Corporation. So I'm involved in the process of recruiting large employers. And so that traditional economic development is, you know, I like to talk about what we do on the entrepreneurial side of being more about economic empowerment. And that's creating a dollar where one didn't exist, or creating a job where one didn't exist, taking an idea and monetizing, commercializing that idea. In 1965, Axiom Corporation didn't exist. And in 1969, that idea was put into the form of a company. And over the course of the last 40 plus, almost 50 years, it's created tons of economic empowerment for individuals. So
this is sort of a key framework that we use. It's well described in the book, and it's developed over time as we've worked on the entrepreneurial ecosystems in the state. But we needed to have a framework that identified that sort of ideal state. And these are going to be very intuitive to all of you. And one is you've got to focus on talent. And that means You've got to have the talent that's willing to take entrepreneurial risks, that has the tool. You've got to have the technical talent. You also need a culture, a can-do culture, a culture that says that they believe in what's possible and they're willing to engage and come out. So a regular drumbeat of activities to support a vibrant entrepreneurial culture. You'll hear Brad Feld in startup communities and the startup community way talk about it needing to be entrepreneur-led, and there's seeders and feeders that are part of that. And it's really true. The culture is a big part of it. If there's not that shared belief, not a lot of good things will happen. It's also important to have community engagement. When we think about that, you're talking about your flagship industries that see startups not as competition for talent, but as the place where future competitive advantage can be found. You need your universities involved, again, the talent pool, but also just engaged in programming. And you need your local municipal folks and governments involved to see this as an important aspect. And then finally, nothing works well if you don't have access to capital from the earliest stages all the way through private equity, and it's got to be debt and equity. This is the context that we use to define the ideal state. And we go in and look at a new area or our own area. We're constantly evaluating how are we doing against these 4 pillars. Over to you.
Yeah. So many of you know about Startup Junkie because Jeff and his team have been around there for 13 plus years. You may not understand the relationship between Startup Junkie and the Conductor, but 4 years ago in November, Startup Junkie and the University of Central Arkansas formed a public-private partnership to effectively bring what the work that Jeff and his team had been doing in a customized fashion, appropriate for our location, to Conway. Conway has its origins as a train town, and the community had already decided that they wanted to use this brand, the Conductor. And so you may not know that the Startup Junkie and the Conductor is literally one team, 2 locations, 2 different brands, but we come together on a weekly and sometimes even a daily basis to collaborate, to share resources, to share sometimes clients that particular areas of expertise that exist in Northwest Arkansas. We'll take one of our Central Arkansas clients and refer them and back and forth, et cetera. And so that was formed about 4 years ago. And this is meant to be more illustrative of those third-party relationships we've talked about. Soon after that was created, we formed a relationship with the Arkansas Economic Development Commission to form the 10X Growth Accelerator. You may be familiar with the Fuel Accelerator there in Northwest Arkansas. And then you may also be familiar with the Ozark Regional Innovation Cluster that Jeff and his team have been running for quite a few years. We were able to secure one of those contracts for the Conductor Regional Innovation Cluster here in Central Arkansas as well. And then we have a number of other companies that engagement of local industry, if you will, that Jeff mentioned, that come together to support the work of the Conductor, both financially and through providing human resources and expertise. And then most recently, we formed an agreement with the Archangel Alliance, the state's only actively operating angel association, angel investor association. And our director of operations here at the Conductor, Grace Rain, serves as the executive director of the Archangel Alliance as well. So that's an example of how we pull together those third-party relationships to be able to build a team and a set of programs that we can then take at no cost to the individual entrepreneurs.
And Jeff, let me add one comment to this. The reason why the Conductor case is important and illustrative is it showed if you're in an emerging area, the template that we developed in the beginnings at Startup Junkie could be replicated and also improved and modified with a public-private partnership, in that case initially with the University of Central Arkansas, in a way that showed that another emerging area could do exactly what we were doing in Northwest Arkansas, modified to meet the specific unique needs that they had in that area. So it's an important illustrative case of how it can be replicated. And the second part of that is that we learned, and I think it's instructive, and you see some of this in the book, is you can't get that done just by parachuting people in from the outside and hoping that you can remote control it. You have to have great local leadership, and therefore, enter Dr. Jeff Standridge, my business partner, who has really built that thing up and made it what it is today. But I think that's kind of a key case. You can take the template, you modify it through good study and research, public-private partnership, but you got to have the right leadership to make it successful.
And then also other partners that exist that I certainly want to, and there are others beyond the ones that we've just put on this slide as well. Given the time that we have, let's talk quickly about where we do it. Jeff, you talk about the ORIC, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Conductor cluster.
Absolutely. This shows, in general, shows the operating region for the Ozarks Regional Innovation Cluster, which was defined by the Small Business Administration Regional Innovation Cluster Program. As Jeff had said before, we won 2 of 14 that are funded in the U.S. It's not just counties in Northwest Arkansas. It also includes Northeastern Oklahoma and Southwest Missouri. And again, the whole point of that is not just to focus on the entrepreneurs, but also to engage with the large companies, which we've done successfully.
Yeah, and the Conductor Regional Innovation Cluster, while it's based in Conway, serving Faulkner County, we were able to expand our reach to 10 additional counties that kind of lie in an arc, if you will, from the west to the north to the east of Faulkner County, and you can see those counties as well. And I have to say that those are the regions for which we've received funding, but Jeff and I and our teams, we work with people all over the state of Arkansas, regardless of where they come from. So quickly, we'll run through some things that are on the horizon, and then how about we open it up for Q&A? Does that work for you, Jeff?
Sounds great.
Right.
Yeah, one of the things that we thought was important was there needed to be a legislative, really a policy agenda development. Tiffany Henry from the Conductor team pulled this together. It's fairly comprehensive. There's 60 total recommendations. It built on the new business plan for America that the Kauffman Foundation put out, but it also had some very unique and differentiated things that we came up with locally. This is a guideline or a roadmap for how we can move Arkansas, and really, for that matter, any emerging area, to the next level. This is publicly available. So we really enjoy putting this together, and we think there's a lot of good ideas that have been put into the policy map.
And we encourage you to take that and download it, arconductor.org, and you get it at Startup Junkie as well. Download that document, and we encourage you to share it with your mayors, your city councils, your state legislators, and point out areas of specific interest that you have that you think of those 60 recommendations. It's only going to be effective to the degree that it's distributed and advocated for. Jeff, you want to talk a little bit about the coalition?
Yeah, sure. And this is another one that's really important, and it's an extremely diverse group. But you think about the 4 pillars that we've defined. Tiffany Henry again leads the meetings that we have on this on a regular basis, and they will cover a specific topic in those pillars, and we get together a coalition of people to talk on a regular basis about what do we do to move forward across each one of those pillars. It constantly draws in new people. It's good conversation. It's not just an opportunity to get together for happy talk, but it comes up with actionable items that we can all take as supporters of the entrepreneurial ecosystem to improve the situation. That's been a very good forum that's been put together.
A couple more minutes to run through the other on the horizon items.
Absolutely, and I'll be quick on this. So, inspired by the bridge program between Israel and the major companies in the U.S., in 2020, we created what we call the Arkansas-Korean Alliance. This establishes a tech venture bridge between South Korea and Arkansas. And most recently, we've got 11 Korea-based ventures that we're helping get enterprise contacts and to roll out in the U.S. We think this will be very strong. And again, another way of there being kind of an arbitrage between places that are not top of mind, but that have really great technology ventures.
I mentioned a few moments ago that Conway Corporation, our public utility, is one of our partners, and primarily they have stepped in and acquired the former city hall, which sits at the crossroads of our downtown area, and the new renderings of that, with their investment of about $3.5 million, will create the Arnold Innovation Center, which will become the home of the Conductor. So a lesson here that I like to talk about is, if you're starting to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem in your community, don't start with a building, because you'll spend all of your time raising money to keep the lights on. Start with a movement. And in our case, the movement existed for about 2.5 years before Conway Corporation raised their hand and said, we want to give you a building to operate out of. So we're very excited about that and hope to be in it toward the end of 2021. We're also excited to have the governor, who's very involved through, we've talked about our relationships with the Fuel Accelerator and the 10X Accelerator, Growth Accelerator, and those come from the governor's rainy day funds through administered through the AEDC. And, he's very active in those accelerators. He visits those accelerators virtually at every invitation. Our second congressional district, Congressman French Hill, very involved in what we do, a former entrepreneur himself. He's also involved in the other entrepreneurial support organizations. And so building those relationships we have found to be key to the overall process as well. Jeff, you want to talk a little bit about the ecosystem building canvas, and then we'll take questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things you'll find in the book is it's equal parts inspiration and kind of storytelling and good background information. But in that, we took the fundamental concept around a business canvas or a lean canvas, and we applied it to a venture ecosystem building canvas. So with each one of these categories, and I realize this is a little bit small to see on screen, so you got to buy the book if you want to learn more about it.
Or go download it at creatingstartupjunkies.com right now.
Exactly. And you can get this. And this gives you a way to assess where you are, where the gaps are, and the kinds of questions you should be asking, and the things that you need to think about if you want to build a venture ecosystem in your local region.
And with that, I'd say let's open it up for questions if we can.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me back in?
We can.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much. It is so exciting. And I had the privilege of getting to be one of the early readers of the book before it was published. And it's already been an invaluable tool just in our work at Startup Junkie as we expand and practice those principles in other communities as well. Facebook takes usually a few minutes for questions to load, but if you're watching and you've got a question for Jeff and Jeff, please feel free to add that in the comment section. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and get started and just ask, for those of us who are watching, whose hands do you want to see this book in? Who's going to best utilize this tool, which is what it really is. It's not just information. It's a tool. It's a very practical and applicable guide with tangible, action items in it.
I'd say there, and Jeff, I'll throw it out there and then you provide color or correct me if you disagree.
No, that's fine.
I believe we have two levels of audience. The first level of audience are folks like Jeff and me and Morgan, you and our teams, folks who have an interest, economic developers, community developers, and entrepreneurial support organizations who want to make an impact in their communities relative to the creation of a sustainable venture ecosystem, to begin getting those key elements in there. And then the secondary audience, I would say, would be the key decision makers who could help that. Mayors, city council members, state legislators, governors, and other public officials, economic development commission folks in each of the states, folks who have the influence and or the funds to help support those efforts. Jeff?
Yeah, and I would add to that, universities play an important role. So universities, community colleges, chambers of commerce, I mean, all those are really kind of key to this as well, because they all know that it's important to have a vibrant, refreshed economy, and that comes through startups and small business.
Awesome. Oh, Caleb mentioned here in the comments, if you want to hear Jeff and Jeff expand more on the book, check out the Startup Junkie podcast. Great plug, Caleb. That's awesome. Yeah, the Startup Junkie podcast downloaded in over 100 countries. That's a fact. They do a great. There's a recent episode where they go into even more detail about the upcoming book. Let's see if we've got any more questions popping up in the comment section. None that I'm seeing so far. I do have another question. How can I get a signed copy?
Well, go to creatingstartupjunkies.com. Sign up for the virtual book signing that will occur on the 28th of January. And we will be providing on a limited basis, depending on the number who participate, we'll be providing signed copies on a first come, first served basis. So I would encourage you to sign up for that soon. And you can do that, and you can download the venture ecosystem and additional samples of the book at creatingstartupjunkies.com.
But you have to bring your own beer. We haven't, beer has not made the digital transformation yet. So
Yeah.
If you want to come to the virtual book signing, make sure you have beer in hand.
Yeah,
or
it's not
bourbon.
the last mile delivery,
Yeah.
either.
We've tried our best. We've had some beer deliveries for some virtual happy hours. That's been pretty great.
Don't try to deliver any to a dry county, okay?
Yeah, okay, we won't. We're Arkansas.
We don't want to cut into the moonshiners. Part. That's right.
You might make it on a TV show, but
Not the kind of TV show I want to make it on, I'm pretty sure. We have another question here from Taylor. What would you say is the biggest challenge you face when building an entrepreneurial ecosystem? How can other ecosystem builders prepare to overcome those hurdles?
Yeah, I think the biggest hurdle is just initially getting that coalition of the willing people that believe that it's important and that are willing to show up. 80% of most things in life is showing up. If you can't get that initial coalition of people that say this is important and they're willing to stay with it, then it's going to be difficult. And we've seen that. There are places that have traditionally been large manufacturing towns, and they really kind of have a devil of a time realizing that if they put as much focus on business creation as they do on business retention through building an entrepreneurial ecosystem, they'd have better results. Because Superman is not going to parachute in and solve your problems in most small communities. You need to take that matter into your own hands. So getting people to believe that, that's a big part of it. And I would say the second piece of that is it's a long march. A lot of times we get asked the question, when are we going to be Silicon Valley? And my first answer is, one, never. Yeah. And two, that was a 75-year process from where they started to where we are today. So you've got to be prepared to be patient and stick to it. And you have to be kind of patiently urgent in that you've got to work on it every day to make it happen.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. It's this constant drumbeat of promotion and cadence, because we've been doing this for 4.5 years in Conway. And last year, even in COVID, we saw over 5,300 individuals interact with the Conductor in some shape, form, or fashion. And still, I find people every single day who have no idea what it is. I met with the city council, presented to the city council in Conway last night. And, they knew the name, but no one could really describe what we do. In fact, my wife, you ask her, she just says, just Google and you'll figure it out. But it's this constant cadence and of activity and event, but also the constant cadence of promotion as well, telling people what you do.
I love that you outline that in the book. You kind of, point out some different scenarios that have successful entrepreneurial ecosystems, but you demonstrate how that is just the tip of the iceberg. And really, this is, these are the decades of foregrounding and, kind of the tilling that's, gone into the fruition that we see in the Silicon Valley, and kind of just set that context and help set that expectation for the long haul and that, that constant cadence that you're referring to. Speaking of Silicon Valley, Caleb asks, what do you tell people that think they want to be the next Silicon Valley? Like that have that, that's the benchmark of success.
I like our property values a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, and I, yes, it was very in vogue for quite a while for everybody to be the Silicon Prairie or the Silicon Hills or the Silicon this or the Silicon that. That shows a tremendous lack of creativity in what your own identity ought to be. I mean, I think it's weak marketing. And B, why be them? I mean, look at the assets and the aspirations and the market realities of where you are and build something great that's different than Silicon Valley. So I think Silicon Valley will always have a place, but unexpected places that have different kinds of assets and attributes, you build on the strengths that you have. So that's kind of how we diffuse that conversation typically.
And I want to go back to another question. I agree with that. When Jeff talked about the coalition of the willing, I completely agree with that. One other thing I would add to that in terms of a challenge is making sure that you get that coalition to a guiding consensus as to what you are going to become. And I've worked with another community where one faction thinks we need to have a building and a co-working space. Another faction thinks we need to have a maker space, and another faction thinks we need to have just some programming and events. And each of them is willing to invest in their idea, but not the other. And so if you don't have consensus among that coalition of the willing as to what it is and in what order it's going to happen, it's going to be a really tough row to hoe.
And Morgan, I'll add one more to that is, with what we do, with all of the services being completely free to our early stage entrepreneurs, that means you're relying on third-party funders. And so the only way you can have a rational story is with focus. And the focus, we said from the very beginning, is we're going to build on the assets we have in retail technology, supply chain technology, and in food and beverage, and then horizontal technology slices that go across those. That was a cogent story. People could believe that we had the talent locally, that we could really make a dent in the universe by doing that, by building on those strengths. Now, over time, there's other things that spring up that are related or tangential, but focus on the strengths first and make those even better. And that's, I think we've done a reasonably good job in that regard.
Yeah. Again, that's another thing I love about the book. It's not how to replicate. It's how to, accentuate and leverage where you're at and take inventory of, what the assets of the area and characteristics are and really leverage those.
Instead of a recipe, I'd call it a guidebook.
Very good. Well, I've one quick question, and this is really deep probing from Brian. What has the co-author experience been like? Are you still friends after co-authoring a book together? I think that's what he's really.
We were never friends. No, I'm kidding. It's
still the beans.
The biggest thing, and it was co-authored by Jeff and me, but it was contributed to by you and other members of the Conductor.
Yes, indeed.
So the real challenge then is in the editing part of it to get it to where it feels like it's a unified voice and what have you. But I mean, everything I've done with Jeff from a partnership perspective has been fantastic. We trust each other, we believe in each other, we support each other, and so I have no complaints there.
Well, and I'll tell you too, in many respects, it was like a mentor-mentee relationship because Jeff Standridge had been through this a bunch of times, and I hadn't. I mean, my idea of a book was I'm going to slap together a bunch of my techpreneur blogs that probably nobody read from 10 years ago, and bada boom, there's the book. This was a more rigorous approach. I mean, we had good third-party research, we had good inputs on it. It was well done, and it was also a team effort. So, we wanted this to not be an opportunity for self-aggrandizement, but a way for the team to tell the story about what we collectively did in Arkansas and to inspire others that they could do it as well. So it's been a great experience. I'm really excited to get this thing out and available to everybody.
Yeah, me too. I've lived in several different countries in a few different states, and Northwest Arkansas is the most collaborative community I've ever been a part of. And I think that. What's that?
Next to Conway, I would agree with that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant Arkansas. I think that leaders like you are the ones who set that tone for collaboration, and I really appreciate it, and I know our community does as well. Okay, the last question.
Let me just say there are a lot of there are other entrepreneurial ecosystem builders in the state of Arkansas that we have to acknowledge and recognize as well. And we even say in the book that it wouldn't be possible without the folks like Jeff Stinson and Health Tech Arkansas and Mike and Ted over at Innovate Arkansas and Wayne at the Venture Center and Mildred in Pine Bluff and just a number of folks that are
Sarah Goforth at the U of A.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Amy Hopper at the iFund. I mean, it's a extremely collaborative state. And we all we figure out a way to work together.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is a tribute to the work they do as well.
Absolutely. I did have one other question slip into the comments here, and it's a good one. So I'm gonna hold on to you guys for a few more minutes if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. Brad asks, for people who are trying to think about their own locality, can you all, Brett and Jeff, describe the difference between the local strengths and assets that you guys each have in Northwest Arkansas versus Conway, and how that has affected the type of ecosystem you're trying to build?
Yeah, so what started our conversation in Conway in 2013 was I was chair of the chamber and began asking the questions. We have an Axiom Corporation, which is a large data analytics firm. We had a 1,400 person Hewlett Packard facility, 3 institutions of higher education, now 4 institutions of higher education right here in Conway. yet we were not and a strong growing software development shop, and we were not producing any startup activity. So when you think about the assets that Central Arkansas has, a very highly dense population of higher education institutions producing talent, a real data analytics capability, and I would say very healthcare heavy as well. Not to mention the potential for ed tech coming out of UCA because of the number of educators that they produce on a yearly basis, being a former teachers college. So those are some of the assets that we have different from Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah, absolutely. And how we got to that understanding was we didn't just say, here's what we did in Northwest Arkansas, we're going to come implement it. We spent 7 months going through a pretty comprehensive customer discovery, asking a lot of open-ended questions to stakeholders to really understand what is it that people aspire for the place to be, what are those assets, and what are the constraints. And then we also benchmarked. We benchmarked other areas that were similar. So that whole process of discovery, benchmarking, understanding the assets you have, and then getting good alignment amongst the stakeholders to understand this is what we want to be, that's crucially important on the front end of the process.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, I will conclude with the grand finale question that we like to end every 1 Million Cups with, and that is, what can this community do for you?
I'll start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Buy the book. If you think that it will be a useful tool and a source of inspiration. The second thing is share it. Share it with everybody you know on LinkedIn and through social. If you think there's something to be learned from what our experience has been over the last 13 years, then share it with people you know in other communities. I mean, this is a bit of a calling for Jeff Standridge and myself. This is a bit of evangelism around what we think is an economic model that makes a difference. So we want to get the word out there. This is not about a money-making enterprise from the standpoint of the book itself. It's really to get some inspiration and some tools out to people that need it.
Yeah, and I'll even give a little more of a recipe for that. Go to creatingstartupjunkies.com right now. Download the Venture Ecosystem Building Canvas. Sign up for the virtual book signing and the likelihood of being able to get a free signed copy. But then on January the 28th, go to Amazon. There will be a promotional price available for the ebook. Buy that ebook and then leave a verified review. Those are ways, and it'll cost very, very little to do that. That special price will be literally pennies or less than dollars. I'll put it that way. To get the ebook, and that will enable you to do a verified review, and that is a way that you can help get the story out, because that increases the impressions that then Amazon creates for the actual book itself. So
it's fabulous. Thank you both so much, and we have got the link for creating Startup Junkies, the landing page for that, in the comments section. So if you haven't clicked on it yet, do it now. All right. Thank you both so much for joining us. And thanks everybody on YouTube and Facebook Live. We will see you here next Wednesday, 8:30. Bring your coffee for 1 Million Cups.
Thanks, Morgan. See you all.
Thanks.